Hey everybody, Kyle McCarley here from the Board and Barrel with another list of the best board games of all time. I figured since my last one of these focused on games we've played on the show, live every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, right here and on Twitch. Find us in all the places at www.bnbtable.top. Since last time I focused on stuff we've played on the show, I figured I'd do a list of stuff we haven't showcased there. Yeah, that's right. Sometimes I play board games purely for my own enjoyment and not just to entertain you people. Okay, realistically, it's always for me because I don't even know if anybody's watching. Please, if you're out there, hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I need to feed my family. Kyle McCarley's favorite games we haven't played on the Board and Barrel. Number 10. First up on the list is a game we haven't played on the show, partly because it's been in my collection so long it kind of fell out of the rotation before Board and Barrel was even a thing, and also because it's extremely simple and short. And one of the things we like to do, since it's a live show, is make the game we're playing a little interactive for our viewers with our Buff and Nerf house rules. And the simpler the game is, the harder it is to come up with a big enough list of buffs and nerfs to make that possible. But this game is definitely a great, quick warm-up game for people who aren't playing board games for an audience. Timeline. There have been a ton of different games released in this franchise, all with a different theme. You've got historical events, inventions, American history, Canadian history, music and cinema, and a whole bunch of others. And it's basically a trivia game. It's very simple, very lightweight. Each installment is just a tiny deck of cards. You could, if you wanted, combine a bunch of them into one giant deck, but you might have trouble separating them again, if that matters to you. All of these cards are double-sided with the same artwork on each side and a little placard of text describing an event or a title or something. And then on just the front side, there's also a year at the bottom. You'll deal out 4 of these cards to everybody to keep face down on the table in front of them without looking at the year on the front. Then you reveal the top card of the deck and put it face up in the middle of the table so everybody sees the year on that card. And then whoever's taking the first turn has the easiest turn of the game, where they have to choose one of the cards that they have in front of them and guess whether it took place before or after the card that's already on the table. If they're right, they add that card to the timeline, and all future cards have to fit in around that new card as well as the first one. If they're wrong, the card gets discarded, and they have to draw a new one to try to add to the timeline on a future turn. Whoever manages to successfully add all of their cards to the timeline wins. It's marketed for 2 to 6 players. I think I've played it with as many as 8. The only thing you've got to be mindful of with large player counts with this game is that it could start taking longer than it should because it gets much more difficult the bigger that timeline gets. So you might think about dealing out fewer cards to everybody if you're home brewing it with a bigger group. But very fun, simple little warm-up game. Highly recommend it. Number 9. Next up is another one that kind of fell out of the rotation before we started this show. I learned about it because of its predecessor from the series Will Wheaton used to do for Geek and Sundry, Tsuro of the Seas. The original Tsuro is a tile-laying game where you play as a kaiju, big Japanese dragon monsters, placing tiles to move around the board and try to knock everybody else's kaiju off the edge so that you're the last one standing. Tsuro of the Seas adds a little twist to that, where you're now playing as the captain of a ship, navigating kaiju-infested waters. So now you've got the tile placement aspect, where you place a tile, move your ship to the end of the path, Maybe you play a little aggressive and try to force other ships off the board or something while you're at it. But you've also got the added element of chaos with these big sea monsters that could pop up out of nowhere and then move around the board at random, which could also eliminate you from the game. It's a simple game with a pretty low ceiling in terms of the skill cap, which I personally love. I like that there's a little bit of strategy to it, but not so much that newcomers can't be competitive on their very first game. And there's also that new element of chaos with the random movement of the kaiju that could wipe you out too. 2 to 8 players, and it does kinda suck if you're the first person eliminated, but it's a quick enough game that you won't be on the sidelines for long. Number 8. Coming in at number 8 is a game that's been around for a long time, but somehow I missed it until pretty recently. And that's probably the only reason we haven't played it on the show. We focus a lot on new and exciting, and sometimes we miss the older classics. I'm sure it'll hit this table sooner or later, though, because it's very good. Splendor, a simple little set collection game with a lot of room for different strategies, and perhaps my favorite aspect, there's no hidden information. Everybody knows what everyone else is working with. You'll collect these shiny little gems and use them as currency to buy cards, which will earn you victory points, give you bonus gems you can use to buy more cards, and count towards sets that you can try to complete for bonus points in a race to be the first player to score 15. The theme on this one feels a little superfluous, which I don't love, but the gameplay is very fun. It's a modern classic for a reason. Check it out if you ever get the chance. You won't be disappointed. Number 7. This next one is one that I actually don't own a copy of, and it's one that I've only had the chance to play really only one full game, actually. The first time I played it, we didn't even finish, so kinda twice, but once, really. Dustin, one of my co-hosts, has a copy of it, and I hope we get a chance to show it off on the show at some point, but I do worry a little bit about spoilers for viewers who might want to check it out and experience it for themselves. Stuffed Fables. It's a co-op narrative adventure from Plaid Hat Games, best known for Dead of Winter. 1 to 4 players, and it makes this list because of the interesting way it presents that narrative. And also because, if you watched my last top 10, you know this, I love this kind of theme, where you take something very childlike and phantasmical and you put a dark twist on it. You all play as stuffed animals, or toys anyway, and the game is almost like one of those old choose-your-own-adventure books. The game board is actually a book, and the board that's on the first page starts you off in the bedroom, and then you're going to be presented with different goals as you play through the game. And depending on whether you succeed or fail at those goals, you'll be turning to different pages of the book and going on a little branching narrative. We played through 1 chapter in about 2 hours, maybe 3, and there are 8 chapters in the base game. Board Game Geek also has a free bonus chapter you can download, and there's an expansion to the game too. I imagine the replayability is probably not great if you've still got the story fresh in your memory, but it still might be fun to go back through chapters you've already played and explore some of the branches of the narrative that you didn't see the first time around. It almost has the feel of like a light co-op video game RPG, but it's in tabletop form. And if you like the sound of that, but you aren't interested in this theme, well, first of all, you're wrong, but second, Plaid Hat has a couple others along these lines, like Comanauts, Familiar Tales, Aftermath, and Freelancers. Number 6. Next on my list is one you'll almost definitely never see us play on the Board and Barrel, simply because it would make for terrible content. You wouldn't be able to follow any of the action because there's just too much going on at once. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a game I absolutely love, and even though I've had it for years, I've only had the chance to play it a handful of times because the conditions have to be just right with your player group in order to get it on the table. But if you can get those conditions right, you're gonna love it. You can play it with as few as 4 players. You're gonna have far more fun if you have at least 6. It supports up to 10, which makes it a great party game, but While there is a variant for playing with an odd number of people, it's definitely a better experience, at least on your first couple games, when you can simplify things with an even number, because you play in teams of 2. Now, when I describe the concept of this one to people for the first time, their eyes go wide, and I can hear them thinking, wow, that is sexist. But the thing to remember about it is that it's very satirical. It's not meant to glorify these gender roles. It's meant to poke fun at them. One player on each team is a lady, and the other is a gentleman. Set in Victorian England, you and your partner will be preparing for a ball at the end of the week. You'll have 5 days to try to make your lady the most elegantly dressed at that ball. And to do that, you're essentially going to be playing 3 different games at once. Each day, the ladies are all going to visit different shops and pick out dresses, shoes, and accessories they want to buy to wear to the ball. And there's an element of set collection to this that can help you maximize the value of these purchases. It's a very fun little mini game within the game. While they're doing that, all the gentlemen are frantically playing the stock market to make enough money to pay for the things their ladies want to buy. That aspect kind of reminds me of the core mechanic of Greedy Goblins, if you've ever played that one. You all simultaneously pick up tokens to look at them and decide if you want to keep them or not, trying to find a set of tokens that'll make you the most money. At the end of every day, you'll meet back up with your partner where you'll talk about how your day went, and most importantly, decide what items you're buying. But the magic of this game is the rule that says you cannot ever talk about money in terms of hard numbers. There's a call for a little bit of light role play here. You can't say, "Sorry, sweetheart, I only made £400 today." No. You have to say something like, "I'm afraid we can't afford that particular dress at the moment, my love, but I suppose if we put it on layaway, there's a chance I could pull some strings and we could make it happen tomorrow." You always have to talk around your strategy in loose terms like that. And obviously, you don't have to do the fun voices if you don't want to, but the more you lean into it, the more fun it is. And that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say this is a tough game to bring to the table. Ideally, you need a group of 6 to 10 people. Ideally, it's an even number of people. Ideally, all of them are willing to lean into the role play. And most importantly, all of them are willing to take the time to learn not just 1, but 2 or 3 different light to middleweight games at once. And also the pre-game setup can feel a little intimidating compared to most party games. If you can get past that major hurdle though, this game is one of my absolute favorites. Number 5. The reason this next one is unlikely to get played on the show is because our set's not particularly conducive to it. Everyone's constantly moving around the table, and we got kind of a small space in here, and our cameras aren't really positioned well to capture that. We might try to figure out a way to do it, but it'd definitely be outside the scope of what we normally do. We'd have to change how things are set up, so that's why we haven't done it yet. It's a dexterity game called Flick 'em Up. Marketed as a 2 to 10 player game, really though, there's no reason to ever try to play it with more than 6 because you'll be waiting way too long between your turns, and inevitably, somebody's gonna get bored of that. It's best played 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, and it almost feels more like a game of pool than a board game. Set in the Old West, one team plays as the sheriff and his deputies, and the other plays as a band of outlaws. The rulebook for the base game gives you 10 different scenarios to play through, each with its own unique setup for all the fun wooden pieces. Cactuses, fences, barrels, and these cool cardboard buildings. And each has a different set of objectives for each team. You'll then take turns flicking wooden discs around the table to move your cool cowboy meeples around and shoot their pistols at the meeples on the other team. One of the best dexterity games that's ever been made, for sure. It's a whole lot of fun. Setup time can be a little intimidating. Pieces can easily go missing if you're not careful about where you're playing and how hard you're flicking things. And the other thing to note is that there have been at least 2 different editions of the base game. There's also some spin-offs and a ton of expansions, none of which I've looked into. I don't know anything about any of those. I'm sure some of them are great. But I know there's at least 1 edition of the base game out there that replaced all the wooden pieces with lightweight plastic ones so they could bring the price down. And I can't imagine that's anywhere near as satisfying to play. Definitely a game that's worth spending a little extra cash on to get the premium components. Number 4. Coming in at number 4, a 2-player game, which is the main reason we haven't played it on the show. We tend to focus on 4 to 6-player stuff. It's also one that's pretty new, to me at least. Fox in the Forest Duet. Fox in the Forest, the original game, is also a 2-player game, and it's a trick-taking game. And it's fun, it's very solid, but there's not much about it that really stands out compared to other 2-player trick-taking games. Fox in the Forest Duet, however, is a cooperative 2-player trick-taking game. Which, if you know me, you know I love co-op. But I also think that makes this game very unique and very, very fun. You can't communicate about your cards or your strategy at all. And in typical trick-taking fashion, you're going to each be playing a card and then winning a trick depending on which cards are played. But since it's co-op, more than any other trick-taker, you really don't want to win every trick. Because depending on who wins each trick and, which cards are played and all that, you'll be moving a pawn back and forth along the small game board to clear these little markers. And the objective is to clear all those markers before the end of the 3rd round. Each round, more of those markers get added, and if you accidentally move your pawn off either side of the board, you lose a life, which may mean you don't even make it to the end of the 3rd round. Adding that co-op element to an already very solid game, I think makes Fox in the Forest Duet one of the best 2-player games out there. Great game for a date night, one of my favorites for sure. Number 3. At number 3, we got another one that hasn't been on the show, mainly because it's been around and in the collection far longer than the show has been a thing. Dixit. This is a classic party game with beautiful artwork and a simple but very fun premise. Every player is dealt 6 cards with these pretty pictures on the face from artist Marie Cardouat. I'm certain I'm butchering that pronunciation. Sorry, Marie. On your turn, you'll act as the storyteller, and you'll choose one of the cards in your hand to tell a story about. Basically, you'll say a word or a phrase that comes to mind based on the picture on that card. Oftentimes when I play this game, it's the title of a movie or a book or something. You'll put that card face down on the table, and then everyone else will choose a card from their hand that hopefully kinda sorta matches that same story. You mix all those cards face down, and then lay them all face up on the table next to the board. Then, everybody who's not the storyteller uses a number token to guess which card is the original. If you're the storyteller, your goal is to get at least one of those players to guess right without all of them guessing it right. Everybody else is just trying to guess the right card, and also looking for some bonus points by fooling other players into thinking their card is the right one. It's a very fun game with pretty limitless replayability because there are so many possible clues you could come up with for all this artwork. And there are a ton of expansions that add even more cards into the mix. One of them, Dixit Odyssey, takes what's usually a 6-player cap all the way up to 12, and it totally still works, so it's a great party game for a big group. The one thing you gotta look out for with it, I think, though, is players who deliberately come up with clues that they know only 1 or 2 other players are gonna get. I think it's fine when you're giving hints about books and movies and stuff that you don't know whether or not everyone else is familiar, but it's not a lot of fun when people are using inside jokes and stuff to kind of game the game. As long as everybody's on the same page about what kinds of clues are okay to use, though, this game is a classic. Definitely give it a shot if you haven't already. Number 2. It was really, really hard to decide which of these next 2 to put at the top of the list. But number 2 is a game that we are definitely never playing on the show, partly because it would be very difficult to capture it on camera as we're playing it, And also because it's a game you really need to experience the first time by playing it yourself. Otherwise, you're spoiling it for yourself and there's no game for you to play. Micro Macro Crime City. This game is essentially a giant Where's Waldo murder mystery. Marketed as a 1 to 4 player game, really your only limitation is how many people can look at the city map at the same time. I actually bought 2 copies of it to take on a weekend cabin getaway so we could use 2 maps at once and play with twice as many people. And that absolutely works as long as you're communicating with each other. You are going to be looking at very tiny pictures, so make sure you got plenty of good lighting. And you might want to consider hanging it up on the wall if you can to avoid the inevitable neck and back pain from leaning over the table way too far for way too long. The cheap magnifying glass that comes with the game is almost worthless, but if your eyesight's not the best, it could be worth it to pick up a better one from the dollar store or something. The theme of this game is great. A city of cute, cartoony characters who are all involved in some sort of heinous crime. And there's a big stack of cases for you to solve with a scale of difficulty that starts off really, really easy and gets lengthy and challenging. Definitely don't plan on finishing the whole game in a single sitting, and I'd recommend getting together a group that you know will all be able to coordinate a time to come back and finish it after 2 or 3 sessions. Otherwise, you'll be doing what I've been doing for years and starting the whole thing over several times, letting other people solve the cases you've already seen and trying to get them to stick around long enough to get to stuff you haven't. But this game is an absolute blast. I can't recommend it enough. I can't wait to finish it so I can go pick up one of the sequels. Number 1. The top game on my list here is one I'm sure we will be playing on the show at some point, but we haven't yet. Trap Words. This is a team-based word game along the lines of like a Codenames or something, but with a very fun spin. Each round, each team picks a clue giver, and the other team will all collectively review the word that clue giver is going to try and get their team to guess. You'll get to write down a list of trap words that the clue giver can't use, but the clue givers don't get to see that list. So there's a whole lot of room for mind games as this goes on and teams get familiar with each other. You got a limited amount of time to get your team to guess your word, but you're immediately thinking, well, I can't use that as a hint. They'll obviously have it on their list of traps. Unless it's so obvious, they think I won't use it, so they didn't bother to waste a spot on it. Should I risk it? I don't know if I have any other ideas. All while the clock is already ticking. This game is uproariously fun, and there's almost no limit to the player count since it's just 2 teams. Definitely needs at least 4, probably no fun with less than 6, but an absolutely phenomenal party game. Especially if you're a fan of Codenames and you're looking for something a little spicier. And an honorable mention to another great party game we couldn't possibly play on the show, 2 Rooms and a Boom. You'll need at least 10 people to enjoy this one properly, playable with up to 40 if you're all familiar with the concept of something like Werewolf or Mafia, but with a great spin. Roll cards are dealt to everyone that will likely place you on the team of either the President or the Bomber. Many of these roles have special powers, and there's a ton to choose from that you can mix and match from one game to the next, but you'll always include the President and Bomber roles. Then, the whole group splits roughly in half, completely at random, and moves into 2 separate rooms. Over the course of a few rounds of play, you'll share allegiance and role information one-on-one with other players in your room at your discretion, then swap 1 or 2 people between the rooms at the end of each round. And deciding who gets to go to the next room is kind of a democratic process, but it's also kind of a dictatorship, and there's this whole element of, hey, let's overthrow the room leader. So, very, very fun. If the Bomber and the President are in the same room at the end of the last round, the Bomber's team wins. If not, the President's team successfully saves their life. Absolute blast to play at a big party, especially once Werewolf has started to become too stale. And that's it! That is my list of top 10 favorite board games that we have not played on the Board and Barrel, at least not yet. What do you think? Are there any others that we haven't gotten to that you think we absolutely must? Are there some on this list that you absolutely hate? Do you like some of these games? Are there some that you hadn't heard of yet, maybe? Some that you think we should play, even if it's going to be difficult to broadcast? Let us know in the comments down below. Also, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, make sure you're getting notifications so you never miss a thing. We've got how to play videos that'll teach you how to play some games. We've got review videos that will tell you what we thought of games after we played them on the show. And we are live every Sunday night at 5 p.m. Pacific time, playing board games for an audience. You guys can mess with us with our Buff and Nerf house rules. It's a ton of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and we will see you Sunday night.